Welcome back, everybody, to another deep dive. I'm so excited to get into this article that you sent over. It's about American politics, coming at it from like this really unique Baha'i perspective. And I've already started reading it, and I am hooked by the way that it kind of reframes these issues that we're so used to hearing about, like political polarization and, all of the challenges that our society is facing.
Yeah, it does a great job of going beyond that simple, left versus right. You'd think that the visions of the Democrats and Republicans would be totally opposed, but the article actually digs into where there's some unexpected common ground and also some surprising downsides to each side.
Yeah, I've always considered myself a pretty strong advocate for individual freedom. I think most Americans probably would. But this article kind of made me pause when it suggested that the democratic approach to individual freedom could actually be contributing to some of the social issues that we're facing. How does that even work?
Well, it points out that while Democrats are often champions of individual liberties, evolving relationship models and, self-expression and things like that, that by focusing so strongly on those things, it might unintentionally downplay the importance of traditional values and institutions that many argue kind of bring stability to society. It's almost like they're overcorrecting in a way, trying to move so far away from what they see as outdated norms that it creates a whole other set of problems.
So it's kind of like a pendulum swing, right?
Yeah.
You try to move away from one extreme and you end up at another. But the article doesn't let the Republican perspective off the hook either, does it?
Not at all. It suggests that the Republican emphasis on tradition and morality, while intending to uphold, morality and social order, can sometimes lead to overlooking, systemic inequalities. So, for example, if you focus solely on the traditional family structure, it might inadvertently dismiss the struggles faced by single-parent households or, folks that don't fit that traditional mold.
That's a really good point. It's like that classic blind man and the elephant thing, where each side is focused on their own specific part of it without grasping the whole. But if both visions have these potential pitfalls, where do we go from there? And that's where I'm guessing the Baha'i perspective comes in.
Yeah, exactly. The article argues that both parties, despite their genuine intentions, often get bogged down in power struggles and partisan politics, and that keeps them from effectively addressing the real root causes of the societal challenges. So the Baha'i perspective kind of steps in and offers this different framework that's focused on unity and the well-being of both the individual and society as a whole.
Okay, I'm definitely ready to dive into that. But first, can we maybe unpack a little bit more about how this political divide, how is it actually impacting our society? I feel like it goes way beyond just disagreements in Washington.
Yeah, totally. The article specifically highlights 3 key areas where, this is playing out in everyday life. Identity and gender dynamics, the breakdown of family structures, and then, of course, the ever-present influence of technology.
Let's start with identity and gender dynamics then. Yeah. I feel like this is a topic that's constantly evolving, especially with the rise of social media.
Yeah, for sure. The article points out that non-binary identities are becoming more and more prevalent, and it sees social media as a major driving force behind that. It creates this space where people can explore different facets of themselves and connect with others who share similar experiences, which is great, but, and this is where it gets interesting, the article argues that this exploration, while positive in many ways, can also lead to a sense of confusion and instability, especially for those who maybe lack a solid moral or spiritual foundation.
So it's not rejecting the exploration of identity, but it's more about having some sort of grounding framework to kind of help navigate it. Does the Baha'i perspective offer that kind of framework?
It does. One of the core Baha'i teachings is the equality of men and women. But it goes beyond that by emphasizing the complementary roles they play in society. It's not about erasing differences, but rather about valuing them and seeing how they contribute to harmonious whole.
That makes a lot of sense. Recognizing differences, but understanding that we're kind of all striving for the same goal of unity. And does that same principle apply to the breakdown of family structures, which I think is a major concern for a lot of people across the political spectrum?
Absolutely. The article points to some, alarming trends like rising divorce rates and declining marriage and birth rates, and suggests that these aren't just isolated issues, but they're kind of symptoms of a larger societal shift.
I imagine economic pressures play a huge role in that too. It's really expensive to raise a family.
Oh, absolutely. The article actually cites a study that found the average cost of raising a child to age 18 is now over $300,000. So that's definitely a significant barrier for a lot of couples who might want to start families.
Wow. Yeah, that's a crazy number. It really makes the article's point even more compelling. So how does the Baha'i perspective kind of address this multifaceted challenge?
Well, for one thing, it emphasizes the importance of marriage and family as the bedrock of society. It even describes marriage as a fortress for well-being and, parenting as a spiritual duty, a responsibility to raise kids with strong moral and spiritual values. It's recognizing that the family unit is not just about personal happiness, but it's about creating that foundation for a thriving society.
So it's about that interconnectedness again, right? And speaking of connection, I'm ready to kind of tackle the elephant in the room. Technology.
Ah, yes. The double-edged sword of the 21st century. It's really interesting how the article doesn't just demonize technology outright. It actually calls for a more mindful approach to using it.
I think we all know the downsides of technology, especially social media. Comparing ourselves to others, getting caught in negativity spirals, feeling pressured to present a perfect image online. It can be exhausting.
It can. And the article gets really specific about these downsides, linking technology to things like infidelity through dating apps, and then the erosion of moral values due to exposure to harmful content. And then just the lack of depth in relationships that are mostly virtual. It's almost like we're trading real, genuine connection for instant gratification.
That's a really good way to put it. But I'm guessing the Baha'i perspective isn't about throwing our smartphones in the ocean and going off the grid, right?
Definitely not. Actually, there's a quote from Baha'u'llah, the founder of the Bahá'í Faith, that really sums it up. He said, "That which is conducive to the betterment of the world and the well-being of nations should be eagerly pursued." It's about recognizing that incredible potential of technology and then harnessing that power for good, for moral and spiritual progress.
Oh, I love that. It's like choosing to be the captain of your technology ship instead of just getting tossed around by the waves. So we laid out some pretty heavy challenges facing society. What's next?
Well, in the next part of our deep dive, we'll explore what the article proposes as a path forward, a vision for transforming both politics and society based on these Baha'i principles. It's not just about identifying the problems, but about finding solutions and taking action.
That's what I'm here for. I can't wait.
So welcome back. We, laid out some pretty hefty challenges in the last part, but the article doesn't just start at diagnosing the issues. It gets really interesting when it starts to lay out a vision for transforming both politics and society based on these Baha'i principles.
Yeah, that's what I'm most curious about, the solutions.
Mm-hmm.
We talked about how political polarization is kind of getting in the way of making any real progress. But what's the alternative?
Well, the article proposes this pretty radical idea, which is a shift from leadership as power to leadership as service. So imagine a system where the people in charge aren't motivated by personal gain or, partisan agendas, but instead they see their roles as serving the collective good.
I'll admit that sounds pretty idealistic, especially given, the state of things right now. But how would that even work in practice? What would a government that embodies this leadership as a service principle, what would it actually look like?
Well, the article suggests a move towards nonpartisan governance. So, where collaboration and consultation are kind of center stage. Instead of this constant back and forth and gridlock, leaders from all sides would come together to find common ground and solutions that benefit everyone, not just their own party or their constituents.
That does sound like a breath of fresh air compared to the political battles that we see all the time. But how do we ensure that those leaders are actually accountable to the people they serve? I mean, we've all seen how good intentions can kind of get lost in the messiness of politics.
Yeah, and that's where transparency and accountability come in. The article stresses the importance of having clear, ethical standards for leaders and making sure that their decisions are really aligned with the well-being of all citizens. It's about moving away from that power over mentality and more towards a system where leaders are truly empowered to serve the people.
So it's a complete reframing of what it means to lead. But leadership alone can't solve all our problems, right? We need to equip individuals to navigate this really complex world and be able to contribute to positive change. And I think the article also touched on the importance of education.
Yes, absolutely. And not just traditional academic education. The article really emphasizes the need for a more holistic approach, one that integrates like moral and spiritual development alongside intellectual learning.
I'm really intrigued by that idea. It's about fostering like well-rounded individuals who are not only, intelligent and capable, but also compassionate and ethical and committed to making the world a better place.
Exactly. It's about teaching those universal virtues like honesty, justice, compassion from a young age. And not just teaching, but also like modeling them in our own lives.
Yeah, it's like that saying, actions speak louder than words. We can talk about those values all day long, but if we're not actually living them out, they won't have any real impact.
Precisely. And the article goes beyond just like teaching those virtues in isolation. It stresses the need for critical thinking skills and an appreciation for diversity, enabling people to kind of navigate the complexities of our modern world with wisdom and understanding. Remember our discussion about navigating different identities. This educational approach could be a really powerful tool for that.
Yeah, it's about equipping individuals to engage in thoughtful dialogue and to really consider multiple perspectives and to work collaboratively towards solutions.
Exactly. And that kind of naturally leads us to another really crucial aspect, which is strengthening the family as the foundation of a healthy society.
Yeah, we talked earlier about those alarming trends of family breakdown. So how does the article propose we, rebuild and strengthen this foundation?
Well, it takes a multifaceted approach. For starters, it acknowledges the very real economic pressures that families are facing these days and advocates for policies that provide tangible support, things like affordable childcare, access to quality health care, and flexible work arrangements that make it easier for parents to balance their responsibilities.
So it's about creating a society that actually values and supports families.
Yeah.
Recognizing that their well-being is essential for the well-being of, everyone.
Yes, exactly. But it goes beyond just financial assistance. The article also emphasizes the importance of things like marriage preparation programs, so equipping couples with the skills and knowledge they need to build strong, lasting relationships.
So it's not just about throwing money at the problem. It's also about addressing the emotional and social aspects as well, investing in the skills and resources that actually help families to thrive.
You got it. And it also highlights the crucial role that parents play in raising children who are morally grounded and capable of contributing positively to society.
It's that ripple effect again, right? Strong families lead to strong communities, which in turn contribute to a healthier society as a whole.
Precisely. And this emphasis on the interconnectedness of things leads us to another really important piece of the puzzle, which is finding the right balance between individual rights and collective responsibilities.
That is such a relevant topic, especially in today's world, where we're constantly navigating these tensions between personal freedom and, societal expectations.
It is, and the article acknowledges the importance of protecting individual liberties. However, it also emphasizes that true freedom can't exist in a vacuum. It needs to be balanced with a sense of responsibility towards the well-being of others and the overall health of society.
It kind of reminds me of that quote about freedom not being the right to do whatever you want, but rather the right to do what you ought. It's about recognizing that our actions have consequences, and that true freedom really flourishes within a framework of shared values and mutual respect.
Exactly. And the article goes on to explore how this balance plays out in practical terms. So it advocates for policies that protect individual rights, while also establishing clear boundaries to prevent harm and uphold the well-being of the community as a whole. It's about finding that sweet spot where individual expression and collective good can coexist.
And I'm guessing this connects back to the idea of dialogue and understanding different perspectives. It's about creating spaces where people can actually come together and share their views and find common ground, even when they disagree.
Absolutely. Because ultimately, if we want to move beyond polarization and build a more just and unified society, we have to embrace the richness and complexity of our diverse world. We need to move away from that us versus them mentality and recognize our shared humanity.
This all sounds incredibly promising. But it also feels like a massive undertaking. Where do we even begin?
Well, the article doesn't shy away from that question. It actually outlines some concrete steps that we can take, both individually and collectively, both in the immediate future and in the long term, to actually start building this better world.
This is the part I've been waiting for. Let's talk action. What can we do starting today to put these principles into practice. So we've covered a lot of ground talking about this like Baha'i-inspired vision for a more unified and just future.
Yeah.
But what I think is really exciting is how this article doesn't just leave us with these like lofty ideals. It actually provides like concrete steps that we can take to start putting those principles into action.
Exactly, yeah. It recognizes that change happens at like multiple levels, right? Individually, within our communities, and on a global scale. And it doesn't require us to like, become politicians or activists. It starts with like simple shifts in our mindset and daily practices.
So what are some of those like simple but impactful steps that we can take in our own lives, like starting today?
Well, one of the most fundamental suggestions is promoting consultation over conflict. So instead of getting caught up in like arguments and trying to like force our opinions on others, we can practice like active listening, genuinely trying to understand different perspectives and working together to find solutions that actually benefit like everyone involved.
Yeah, it's like that saying, seek first to understand, then to be understood. So often we just like rush to judgment or try to like win the argument, but that rarely leads to like genuine connection or progress.
Exactly. And this shift from conflict to consultation can apply to like all areas of our lives, from our personal relationships to, our interactions in the workplace and our community. It's about fostering a culture of collaboration and mutual respect.
That's a great starting point.
Yeah.
And speaking of fostering a culture, the article also emphasizes the role of like moral education, right?
Yeah.
Not just in schools, but within our families and communities as well.
Absolutely. It's about like consciously integrating those core virtues we talked about earlier, honesty, justice, compassion, into the fabric of our like daily lives. It starts with, teaching these values to our children, both through like explicit instruction and by, modeling them in our own actions.
It's like we're planting these seeds of virtue that can then like grow and blossom into a more ethical and compassionate society. But it goes beyond just our families, right? How can we promote this kind of moral education in our wider communities?
The article suggests things like, supporting organizations that promote character development, getting involved in mentorship programs, or even just like initiating conversations about these values with our friends and neighbors.
So it's about creating that ripple effect, right? Where these positive values radiate outward from our individual actions to influence the culture around us. And I imagine this ties into the article's point about supporting families. It's not just about like raising our own children well, but about contributing to a society that values and strengthens families, like as a whole.
You're absolutely right. It suggests like tangible actions like volunteering our time to help struggling parents, advocating for policies that make raising a family more affordable and accessible, or even just like offering a listening ear and a helping hand to families in our own circles.
Yeah, it's like recognizing that families don't exist in isolation. They're part of this like larger web of interconnectedness, and we all have a responsibility to contribute to their well-being. And speaking of interconnectedness, we can't forget about the role of technology. The article encourages a more mindful and purposeful approach to using these like powerful tools.
Yes, it's about becoming conscious of the content that we're consuming, the connections that we're forming, and the way we allow technology to like shape our lives. Instead of passively scrolling or getting lost in like the digital noise, we can make deliberate choices to engage with content that inspires us, connects us with others in meaningful ways, and helps us contribute to like positive change.
It's about recognizing that technology is a tool. And like any tool, it can be used for good or for ill. It's up to us to wield it wisely. Those are all like incredibly practical and empowering steps that we can take like right now. But what about the long-term vision? How do we move from like individual actions to creating lasting change on a societal and global level?
Well, the article points to like 3 key areas for long-term transformation. First, it emphasizes the need to cultivate a new culture of leadership, one that prioritizes service over self-interest and is committed to the well-being of all citizens.
So it's not just about waiting for the perfect leader to come along. It's about like actively participating in the process, holding our elected officials accountable, and advocating for policies that align with these principles of unity and justice and progress.
Exactly. It's about being active citizens, not passive observers, and using our voices and our votes to shape a better future. And alongside this shift in leadership, the article emphasizes the importance of global cooperation.
That goes back to the idea that a lot of the challenges that we're facing, climate change, poverty, conflict, they transcend national borders. and they require, like, collective solutions.
Precisely. It's about recognizing our interconnectedness as a global community and working together to create a more just and sustainable world for, like, everyone.
And finally, the article talks about fostering a new paradigm of identity, one that moves beyond the limitations of, like, current social and political categories. What does that look like in practice?
It's about recognizing that our identities are, like, multifaceted and fluid, encompassing not only our individual characteristics, but also our interconnectedness with others and our shared humanity. It's about moving beyond, like, rigid categories and embracing the richness and complexity of human experience in all its forms.
So it's about seeing ourselves not just as individuals or members of specific groups, but as part of a larger whole, united by our common humanity and our shared aspiration for a better world.
Exactly, and I think that's the most hopeful and inspiring aspect of this whole Baha'i-inspired vision. It reminds us that we're not powerless in the face of these challenges. We all have a role to play in creating a more just, unified, and flourishing world.
This has been such an insightful deep dive. I feel like we've gone way beyond just analyzing an article. We've explored, like, a whole new way of thinking about the world and our place in it.
I agree. And I hope our listeners are feeling, like, inspired to take action, to start putting these principles into practice in their own lives and communities. Remember, even small acts of kindness and compassion and understanding can have a ripple effect, contributing to a more positive and hopeful future for all of us.
Beautifully said. And to our listeners out there, we would love to hear your thoughts on this episode and the ideas that we've explored. What resonated with you? What questions are you still pondering? Let's keep this conversation going. Thanks for joining us on The Deep Dive, and until next time, keep seeking, keep questioning, and keep diving deeper.